As we finish April and begin the month of May, we read the nuts and bolts of the reign of King Saul and the rise of David. Saul is a warrior, and that is why the people wanted a king, someone to lead them in battle so they could have security from their enemies. Saul was good at it, and so was his son Jonathan. In the midst of this week's reading is a story about the prowess of Jonathan as a warrior, a story we often overlook. It's a story I enjoy, and I hope you'll take it in. But first, Saul is anointed king. And then what happens? He goes back to plowing his father's field, working the oxen. That is, until the people's need for him to be a warrior king summons him to office, and then his reign truly begins. As his power grows, he becomes more of a tyrant. He also grows paranoid and suspicious of anyone close to him, including both his son and his right-hand man, David, son of Jesse. He has reason to be suspicious of David. First, the prophet Samuel informs Saul that because of his disobedience to the commands of God, he will not establish a dynasty. Someone else, not his own heir, will become king after him. It becomes obvious to Saul pretty quickly that this someone else is the young David. But first, David becomes dear to Saul. He defeats the Philistine giant, Goliath of Gath. I'm sure that story is familiar to you. He begins to lead Saul's army. He sings for Saul. Saul loves him as a son, but Saul grows jealous of him because of his popularity. And Saul is troubled at the intimate friendship between David and Jonathan. After all, Jonathan is the king's heir, and he sees David as a probable usurper, and a friendship between them can't be good for Saul's legacy. So Saul uses his daughter Michal as a trap to try to get David killed. That doesn't work. David, of course, becomes wise to what Saul is trying to do and runs away, with Michal's help. Our reading this week describes the years David and the men pledged to him wander from place to place, evading Saul and his army, and Saul's pursuit of David in the attempt to kill him. At first, Jonathan doesn't believe that his father would try to kill his friend. But when he makes an excuse for David's absence and his father throws a spear at him and insults him, he knows that David's life is in danger. Let me comment on this for a moment. Since the nature of Saul's insult of Jonathan is sexual, many have supposed that David and Jonathan were lovers. That isn't necessarily the case. People in the Bible were as given to using sexual terms for insults as we are. But it is also very possible, given the conventions of warrior heroes of the past. It is interesting to note that if they were lovers, the only person who disapproved was a jealous paranoid who had been rejected by the Lord as king. This week's reading ends with a poignant story when David had the opportunity to kill Saul and didn't. When David showed himself to Saul and pointed out that he could have harmed him, but did not, Saul wept and said, "Is this your voice, David, my son?" Saul came to believe that David indeed would be king after him. But he did not stop in his pursuit of his rival. But that story we'll pick up next week.